Keith, what do we know so far?
Well, going with a lower price Model 3 with a shorter range gives Elon the opportunity to meet these very ambitious sales volume targets he has. You know, they're planning to produce 400,000 Model 3s this year. That's a lot of Model 3s, and you can't sell them all at over $50,000. So having a lower price Model 3 should bring in new customers, bring in value customers. The average price of a car in the United States these days is $37,000. So this makes it a Joe average kind of Tesla for the first time.
Gene, hasn't Tesla promised that the price would eventually come down to $35,000? It just took some time to get there?
Yeah, this was the original promise back 2 years ago, Emily. And so in some respects, this isn't news, but in other respects, it's probably the biggest news since the Model 3 itself was announced, because the simple math was that many people felt that this car, to get to $35,000 and to produce it profitably, was impossible. And so I think that is what is so important here. The $35,000, it doesn't sound like it's that significant, but compare that to the rest of the car industry, which the few that do have EVs are typically at 70,000 plus right now. And you can start to quickly see why Tesla's 80% market share that they had in the U.S. last year on electric vehicles, they can maintain that kind of share, at least in the near term, the next 1 or 2 years.
Right. Tesla, as you mentioned, already way ahead in the electric car market. It's going to be hard for other automakers to catch up. Again, Tesla shares halted as we wait for Tesla to officially announce what we believe will be a lower cost, $35,000 base price for the Model 3. Keith, why did it take these 2 years to get here?
You know, it's typical of automakers, and I know Tesla is not a typical automaker, but usually you start with the higher price models because that gives you the biggest profits. It gives you the payback. And then you move down the price ladder and start putting out the lower price models and go for the volume. So you need to get a critical mass going with those high price ones. He's achieved that, but now he has these very ambitious production targets. And in order to sell all those cars he plans to produce, he really needs to have a lower price model.
Now, Gene, how many more cars do you think Tesla will be able to sell at this price? How does this change your model?
Well, it will. Right now, we were a little bit conservative relative to their 400,000 expectations. We're at 300, so we probably need to go and rethink what our estimate will be for this year and for next year. But the simple takeaway is this, is if you look at the broader market, there's 80 million vehicles sold a year. Last year globally is 1% of those were electric. In the future, there's no question that 100% of vehicles, now that might be 2 years from 10 years from now or 30 years from now, but that's ultimately where we're going. And so I think how many can they sell? What does it mean for the model? Is this can be a significantly bigger company because of the $35,000 price.
Meantime, Keith, earlier this week, we covered the news that the SEC has asked a judge to hold Musk in contempt for his tweets around those production numbers which Gene was mentioning. Is it 500,000 or 400,000? And did he tweet too soon? Do you think some of these legal issues could impede Tesla's progress this year?
Well, they could impede Elon's progress, that's for sure. You know, he once again, as we know, put out a tweet that said they were at a 500,000 rate on the Model 3 when, in fact, they're going to produce 400,000 this year, and he had to correct that. So he continues to tweet unfettered, and that's the issue the SEC has.
Gene, you had some choice words about Musk's latest tweets. You said that he has been reckless. How concerned are you that these issues will continue to affect his leadership and possibly then the company?
Concerned, and I want to make it clear that I'm a believer in the Tesla story and believe in Elon Musk and think that he is still better that he is part of the company. But nonetheless, I was at one point 6-9 months ago hopeful that he could change. And unfortunately, he's not going to change. He's going to continue to do some reckless things on the edges. And I just hope that at least this recklessness doesn't actually impact the business, because the company does have a wonderful mission, and I think they're in a great place to change the world.
Now, we're continuing to get headlines now out of this official Tesla news conference. Tesla saying it's shifting worldwide sales to online only. It says the Model 3 will have a 220-mile range, top speeds, 130 miles per hour. Gene, what does that mean?
It means that it's a great car. And I think that other electric cars that are even kind of in this $40,000–$45,000 range, they're not cars that you would want. And I think that's the big takeaway here. This is an electric car that you'd actually want. And we're not even talking about some of the tech inside. That's just some of the specs around the performance of the car. So I think when you compare at this price point, it will be 80% plus market share and probably close to 100% market share. It's just, and I think that the car companies, the industry, is going to go through an incredible turbulence in the next few years, because to try to build something comparable that they can do at scale and make money on is a calculus problem that I don't think they're capable of solving.
Keith, Tesla doesn't do much traditionally, as you've said. Is there any other automaker that has online-only sales?
No, the automakers use the traditional dealer network. Elon has been, very explicit in how he wants to sell direct to consumers, which has gotten him in, sort of trouble with state regulators who are very tight with traditional dealers. So he's finding a model that works for Tesla. And an important thing about this car, it won't have quite the range of the more expensive models, but it will bring in new customers to Tesla that will be the seed corn for this brand. This will give them a future beyond just the very wealthy people who've been able to afford Teslas before this.
I still remember being at Tesla the day the Model 3 was unveiled, taking a test drive in one of those early models, Gene. What does this cost? Let's talk about what the cost means in terms of Tesla making money. They can get the car down to this price, but how will that impact Tesla's bottom line?
What they've said versus what it's going to look like initially are two different things. And I think the answer is that these initial units will likely not be profitable. I can't imagine them making money on them for the next several months. But they do have ambitions. And they talked about in the December quarter that gross margins should be 20%-ish on the Model 3. And so now that was with an average selling price of just over $50,000. So as you kind of scale that back to 35, I think that the math is there. And I mentioned that earlier. I think that that's the real substance here, is that they're able to produce a car at, I think the average price is going to end up being close to $40,000 at the end of the day, but still at a much lower price and be profitable. And as long as they can keep it to really 5% or better margins on that, I think investors would be thrilled, because of this size of this growth curve is one of the biggest waves coming in tech.
Now, getting more detail from this Tesla news conference, not only are sales shifting to online only, but Tesla says that all the sales going online combined with other ongoing cost efficiencies will enable them to lower the cost of all cars by about 6% on average, allowing them to get to that $35,000 Model 3 price point. Keith, what does this all add up to?
Well, I think what it means is Tesla sees some competition coming from the German luxury car makers. Others are trying to replicate the Tesla formula, and they're trying to get out ahead of that. They are trying to build a critical mass so they can continue to control the lion's share of the pure electric market.
Elon Musk. The Securities and Exchange Commission wants a judge to hold the Tesla chief in contempt because of his tweets. Now, on February 19th, Elon Musk tweeted this: Tesla made 0 cars in 2011, but will make around 500,000 in 2019. The SEC is saying that that's a violation of his settlement agreement. Though Musk clarified it again, he tweeted again this: meant to say annualized production rate of end of 2019, probably around 500,000. That is 10,000 cars a week. Deliveries for a year still estimated to be about 400,000. So Musk is back on Twitter again this morning. Even though these these tweets keep getting him in trouble, a Twitter user pointed out Musk's first tweet did not move the markets, although the SEC's complaint did. Musk tweeted this: exactly. This has now happened several times. Something is wrong with the SEC oversight, says Elon Musk. Joining me right now to discuss is former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney at the Bianchi Law Group, David Bruno. David, it's good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
So what do you make of all of this? I mean, Elon Musk's tweeting, the SEC's watching, obviously, his Twitter feed.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just take a couple steps back. The 60 Minutes interview that he did, where he said, I have no respect for the SEC, and I don't think he would be in this present situation if it were not for that interview. In fact, in the papers that the SEC filed, they actually cite that exact transcript and saying that he has contempt. He is not following the order. And it doesn't matter that he corrected it because he didn't have the oversight and he didn't get the pre-approval to do it in the first place.
So what is the wrongdoing? What the settlement says what? That he can't make predictions like that?
Well, it's anything material to the company needs to be oversaw and pre-approved by counsel. And
you can't just do it on Twitter.
You can't, exactly. That's what got him into the problems in the first place last year when he talked about private funding. Right, so that is the reason for the settlement agreement. Right, exactly. That's the reason for the settlement in the first place.
I mean, a CEO cannot give forward-looking statements anytime he wants, and so he's
a CEO of a public company.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, he can. It's just most companies are maybe a little more careful about crafting what that forward-looking statement is going to be before it goes out.
Well, it has to go through an accuracy perspective of whether the forward-looking statement is accurate.
And who are you making the forward statement to?
Otherwise, it's manipulating the stock.
You can't just say it in a room of analysts. You've got to have a public forum.
And I think they can as long as it's true. And it's not a misrepresentation.
Right. The accuracy.
And it's accurate.
Okay.
Right? Because that was his problem last year.
But I think his argument is that while this particular exact tweet may not have been pre-approved, the general concept of sharing this type of information has been?
Correct. That's his argument. He dates back to the January 30th report and also the transcript of the call with the investors. The problem is it's not verbatim. It's not the same. And in the policy that Tesla actually came up with, it said that if it's after 2 days, it has to be reapproved. So that's 30 days before. So even if it was accurate, it still had to be reapproved, and he did not go through that process.
And if I'm not mistaken, that tweet, he did have a mulligan because he changed the facts. He went from 500,000 to 400,000.
Right. Well, initially he said, we're going to produce 500,000. Right. Then he clarified. He said, I'm talking about annual production rate. Right. So was he accurate? No, he wasn't accurate.
Right.
In the first one.
He had a mulligan. That's all I'm saying.
So what is the law on mulligans? Like if a company puts out a earnings release and shortly thereafter says, oh, do-over, this is what we meant, are they fine, or does that tend to be a serious problem?
Yeah, I think generally if it's corrected and it's not an intentional act, I think the company would be okay. Yeah. However, this is a different situation because he's under a settlement order as we speak with the SEC. And it's not just about the misrepresentation, it's about the procedure that he went through and he didn't get the prior approval.
I've been on a public board. Social media is likely very new to public boards. Sure. And the idea that we have a CEO who's such a rock star like Elon Musk, that everyone's listening to everything. It's one of the high shorts in the market, one of the high longs in the market. It's trading at a multiple a lot of people don't really understand. People are watching everything he says every minute of the day.
But the SEC is not new to any public board and any CEO. And he went online on social media, on Twitter in August and said something that wasn't true.
Right.
Period.
Fully funded.
He said funding secured. Right. Remember that in early August. And multiple people reported that they had not. They were still trying to line up potential investors and buyers when he said that. So that was not true. He's in trouble because of that, and he keeps poking the bear. Well, eventually, they're going to come after you. They're going to get you. And you can call that wrong or not, but they're going to go through every single thing that he says on Twitter, everything, whether it's an emoji or not, everything that he says publicly in a public forum, and they're going to go after him. In this instance, because they corrected it, that they're probably not going to bar him from acting as in management capacity at a public company. Keep going. Keep at it. He's going to get in more trouble unless they can rein him in, or he can control himself, which he doesn't seem to be able to at this point.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think he may be subject to sanctions if the contempt is actually found, because there are defenses here. He's going to say, I corrected it. We made diligent efforts to comply. Right? So, yeah, I don't see them suspending or barring him based on these facts, but he's still at it today. and let's see what the future brings.
He also, in his defense, he said something that he pointed out that on the quarterly conference call, somebody asked him, noted his comments from the call that suggested Model 3 deliveries could range between $350,000 to $500,000. This 500,000 units this year. He pointed that out on Twitter. So that's why he's not going to get in trouble for this. But if he keeps it up, he will get into trouble.
Yeah, on that call, it was very different, though. He was talking about the Shanghai factory, and if it was complete by the end of the year, they'd get to that growth rate. So that's not going to be a defense in my mind.
Yeah, all right, we'll leave it there. David, great insights from you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
David Bruno joining us there.